We're going to talk about the big, beautiful bill. I always encourage people to be skeptical. Be skeptical of corporations and be skeptical of politicians and, try to insulate yourself from political circus that seems to go on from time to time. One thing about you're an owner operator, having your own small business, driving truck, a lot of things aren't relevant to you. Like with me, I'm leased on a big box carrier, and I'm under contract freight, and it's really steady freight. Steady work. So I don't get too wrapped up in, whether it's one administration or the next, for the most part. But it's tough if you're working for a corporation like a regular employee. What happens is that oftentimes corporations respond or react to what the legislation was passed in Congress. So for example, if the legislation lowers taxes, then corporations are more likely to hire employees and grow their business. So as an employee of that company, you feel like you have good job security. You got hired, and the company's growing, it looks great. And then the next administration, another legislation package goes through Congress, and it's just the opposite. Now it's going to raise taxes or raise regulations. Companies aren't going to hire, and they may even start laying people off. So now here you are doing pretty good for the few years previous administration. The next administration is just the opposite. Now you're facing layoff and unemployment, and it's a cycle. It never ends. Economy grows, you get hired. Economy shrinks, you get laid off. Over and over and over again. Because it never stays stagnant. It never is stable for you to enjoy long-term employment. And different administrations have different policies with tariffs and things like this, and your job or your plant may close and move overseas. This is something you need to understand if you're going to get into trucking. Is the truck and the supply chain is pretty steady work if you get in the right niche. So like here at Crete, the customers are Walmart, for example, and the loads are staple products. We haul a lot of groceries, water, paper products, things that people need, whether the economy is good or bad. So consequently, the freight is always kind of like steady work. So when these things happen in Congress, a big, beautiful bill, or, the politicians say, we have to pass it to see what's in it. This is crazy. It's crazy, and here you are trying to hold on to a regular job Monday through Friday, weekends and holidays off, and it seems impossible. Well, a lot of that goes away once you start driving truck. If you get into the right trucking company and they have contract freight, and they have steady customers, you'll be somewhat insulated from the ups and downs of the economy and the politicians and the spending packages and things like that. It's like, well, it's interesting, but I can pretty much count that my job's going to stay the same. It's really not going to affect me. Now, what will affect me is a lot of spending will raise taxes. That will affect me because I'll end up paying more in taxes. You're a small business owner, and certain politicians just love to tax small businesses. And what happens when small businesses are taxed is that they don't hire. They're like, I would like to hire, but I got to pay all these taxes. So, those people who need jobs are going to have to be on government welfare instead of working. So these packages are big, and I would prefer smaller packages, a skinny bill, not a big, beautiful bill. But the problem is, skinny bill would never get passed by both chambers. It may be the most perfect, logical, common sense. Everybody would agree that would be great. It won't pass. You get a big, beautiful bill full of pork and giveaways, it'll pass. And it's like, this is crazy. Our debt is 37 trillion. I fully expect within 10 years it's going to be 50 trillion. That means you're going to pay taxes. It's something that you're going to work harder for less. Your standard of living is going to be less because you could be paying more in taxes. But I would say in this instance, the big beautiful bill, it probably should pass. It's not perfect, but I don't think a skinny bill is going to pass. So it's going to have to be a big bill, and there's not a lot of room there to work with. The numbers just aren't there to support less spending. The people that are in place like to spend money. So until they get reelected or don't get reelected, their voting pattern's not going to change. So I would like to see a more skinny bill, but that's kind of like wishful thinking. I think the big beautiful bill will probably pass. There's some good things in there. For owner operators, if it can cut some of the red tape, that'd be good. I think there's some tax incentives there. If you want to purchase a truck, you might be able to write off more of the depreciation value in the first year, for example. You'd have to review it with your accountant, but there could be some good things in there for an owner operator. And if it grows the economy, that's good too, because that's more freight that will have to be hauled. That's always good. The spot market should be able to recover. I think a lot of the economy presently is holding its breath, waiting for this legislation to get passed. It's like companies aren't ready to pull the trigger on investing and purchasing new equipment until this bill is passed. Once it's passed, then I would expect more spending for companies to buy equipment. I would expect more hiring. I would expect more freight, start hitting the market. And I would think the economy would do extremely well. So I would be in favor of passing the big beautiful bill, but I still don't like the big beautiful bill. I mean, it's fine, you want to pass it. I don't see any other way not to pass it. I would like to see them cut the deficit. I would like them to see cut the national debt. I mean, how much longer are we going to go with 37 trillion? I think the interest on that debt itself is $1 trillion a year. It's larger than our defense spending for the Pentagon. We spend more on interest than we do on defense. That's kind of like running a business very, very poorly. If you did that as a small business owner, you would be out of business. You couldn't carry that much debt. But because it's the government, they can. So you'll pay for it. Future generations will pay for it. And until we get a different set of politicians in there that are serious about cutting spending, this is probably the best that's going to happen. Right now, there's a big spending package that's got a lot of pork. It satisfies all the politicians, and they'll kick the can down the road again on reducing debt. But someday that debt's going to come due, and they'll have to get serious about cutting spending, but it won't be today. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.